said essentially regulating imports is not a tax. Doing taxes is for Congress, and therefore he went too far. Again, we're talking about over $130 billion that has been paid by these companies over the last several weeks. You see there the breakdown of the justices again: Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Barrett, all appointed, Justice Gorsuch and Barrett, I should say, appointed by President Trump, now ruling against him in this major, major blow to the president's agenda.
Laura, how much of a surprise is this, considering what you heard from the justices in terms of their questioning during the oral arguments and what you heard from the plaintiffs and the government?
We knew that they were skeptical at oral argument. They sort of previewed, just based on the text alone, their skepticism there. We just didn't know exactly what the breakdown would be, how they would line up. You know, it's never clear based on oral argument. Are they testing or are they sort of previewing? Again, we'll have to read through this carefully to see just all the implications of what comes next for these companies, what the president does going forward here, using other authorities. I mentioned the White House has suggested he would do that. Right. He has done that when it comes to some tariffs, but at least using this Emergency Powers Act, the court has said he has gone too far.
You raise an interesting point. About $133 billion potentially would have to be refunded to companies. A lot of folks also wondering what this decision could mean for the markets. We can tell you a live look right now at the Dow Jones. You can see the market so far responding positively, up almost 60 points on this Friday. The market's been open about 40 minutes. Garrett Haake is standing by there at his post at the White House. Garrett, again, this decision just coming down a few moments ago. Any word from the White House so far?
Craig, interestingly enough, it's possible that the president is one of the few people who doesn't know yet about this Supreme Court decision. He's in an event as we speak right now with some of the nation's governors. The press was in the room earlier, then escorted out, not back in the room. The president was expected to give remarks during that event. It is entirely possible no one has told him yet that his signature domestic policy, his signature economic policy, really the centerpiece of the way in which he governed across the first year of this term, has been thrown out by the Supreme Court. Craig, I can't overstate how important these tariffs were as a tool for President Trump. He used them, yes, to address trade deficits, to try to bring money in to the U.S. government, money that he'd already, teased sending back out to the American people in the form of refund checks or to use to fund other programs in the government. And he has claimed repeatedly that the tariffs have helped him solve global conflicts around the world by the threat of their imposition. Now, all of that is off the table for him, at least temporarily. Now, the White House has known that this decision was a possibility. They've been looking into alternative methods, alternative statutes under which the president might be able to levy some of these tariffs unilaterally without going through Congress. But this has been the president's favorite tool, his favorite thing to even talk about going back decades before his time in public service. Now off the table, the White House is going to have to go back to the drawing board to figure out how much of this economic program can even be salvaged.
It will also be interesting to see what we hear from the White House in terms of a response, because, as you alluded to, this wasn't just about tariffs. This was a test of presidential power. This is a conservative high court, a court that has been, by and large, somewhat favorable to this administration so far with a lot of its decisions. Not this time around. It will be interesting to see, Garrett, if the president decides to speak directly to some of the justices, especially perhaps one or two of the justices that he appointed.
It's a great point. The president views so much of this as about personal loyalty. And Craig, whether he decides to do it before next week or not, the president will have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people and traditionally to some of those judges in person when he delivers the State of the Union address. Remember, that's next Tuesday. Typically, at least some of the justices attend that event. What the president has to say about tariffs to those justices when they're seated just a few feet away from him in the House chamber, I think could be a fascinating element to what's already going to be, I think, a pretty dramatic speech next week.
Well, one thing does appear to be clear, at least so far. We may not know what's going to happen to that $130+ billion that's already been tariffed, if you will. But the market's responding positively. In just the last 2 minutes since Garrett and I started our conversation, the markets are up about 140 points. So investors seem to be, again, responding positively to this decision. Laura Jarrett, our senior legal correspondent here, you've been able to sift through the decision a little bit more. What else have you been able to make?
Yeah, it's interesting just to see Justice Gorsuch explaining in his concurrence here, sort of knowing the criticism that could be on the way, at least from a political standpoint. And he says, all I can offer them that most major decisions affecting the rights and responsibilities of Americans, the American people, are funneled through the legislative process for a reason. Yes, legislating can be hard and take time. And yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design, essentially saying the Constitution was set up this way, having the legislative branch be the one that can levy taxes. And the president, of course, can enforce the laws. He can regulate some imports, but he can't go too far. And the Constitution does that by design.
There also seemed to be this question of whether tariffs themselves could be considered a form of taxation, right?
Yeah, and it's not that clear that the court sees it obviously the same way as the president has. But it's worth noting, no president has ever tried to do this before. What has happened here was so sweeping and such a sort of a broad exertion of authority. The court, it was facing something that had just never been done before. And so I think obviously the implications of this and the precedent that it sets going forward, I can't be overstated.
It will be interesting to see what it could mean potentially for executive authority. There is also, of course, this other case that we're watching, which is another test potentially of executive authority involving the Fed.
Well, and this whole term, if you think about it, is really the Supreme Court taking a hard look at some of the things Donald Trump has done that have never been done before, like trying to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board, Lisa Cook. It's another big case on their docket. He's tried to fire her. He's tried to fire a woman who was on the FTC. They obviously have other big questions concerning his birthright citizenship plan. So this really is the term of SCOTUS and the president, and how they see executive authority, at least as it results to tariffs, is a big blow. 6-3,
remind us once again, which were the conservative justices that sided with the liberal justices?
Yeah, the Chief Justice, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Barrett joining Justice Sotomayor and Justice Jackson and Justice Kagan here in a 6-3 decision, Craig.
Okay. Our senior legal correspondent, Lord Jarrett. Lord, thank you so much. Garrett Haake there at the White House as well. Thank you so much. Again, for those of you just joining us, 6-3, the Supreme Court ruling that most of President Trump's tariffs are, in fact, unconstitutional. What remains unclear, though, at this point is what happens to the money that has been collected. Again, so far, more than $130 billion from large and small businesses around this country and around the world as well. That is going to conclude this NBC News special report. We will have much more ahead on NBC News Daily and, of course, on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com. And the full wrap-up tonight on NBC Nightly News. I'm Craig Melvin. We will return most of you to the Today Show.